So I'm going to, I will ask you to mute yourselves if you're not already muted, just to keep the background noise down. And then once we get to a part where there's, you can unmute yourself, or you can use the chat to ask questions or whatever. But okay, good morning. Welcome to the Good Thunder Reading Series virtual workshop with essayist Erica Trabold. I have just a few announcements to make before Erica gets started. The reading series this year receives support from MSU's Department. Good. I just had to check that I wasn't muted because I would do that. Anyway, so the series receives support from MSU's Department of English, the College of Arts and Humanities, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and individual donors who we appreciate very, very, very much. Please come to the other virtual events scheduled for today, a craft talk at 3 p.m. and a reading at 7:30 tonight. If you got here for this event, you know how to get to the other events. Bring a friend, tell a friend, please join us. Erica Trabold is a Nebraska-born essayist. Her debut collection, 5 Plots, was selected by John DeGata as the inaugural winner of the Deborah Tall Lyric Essay Book Prize. It was published last year by Seneca Review Books and was awarded a 2019 Nebraska Book Award for nonfiction. She is a graduate of the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and the MFA program at Oregon State University. Currently, she lives and teaches in Central Virginia, where she is a visiting assistant professor at Sweetbriar College. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you very much, Candace. Thank you, and thank you to MSU for inviting me, for making this possible. It's just such a privilege to be in Minnesota with you. I really wish I could be, because as a Midwesterner, it's the kind of landscape that I love. But I do appreciate that even in the midst of all of the craziness of the pandemic, we find a way to make it work, and we can adapt, and we can still meet together and talk about writing. So thanks again for having me. I hope that what I'm about to share will be useful for projects in any genre. I'm primarily a creative nonfiction writer and an essayist, and so that's kind of where my thinking about writing primarily comes from. But I think that as long as your project involves characters or personas of some kind, or speakers of some kind, whether that's a fiction project or poetry or nonfiction or some combination thereof, that this can be sort of a useful way in. So I guess just for the sake of interaction, I've been teaching on Zoom here and there this semester. I'd be curious to know who you are, if you want to type in the chat and say hello. And I'm curious, what's driving your writing right now? What is keeping you going right now? Where are you drawing inspiration from? That's a question that has been a lot on my mind lately. So I usually, as a nonfiction writer, write about personal experience. And so it followed that I would sort of create a prompt along those lines. Oh, when I started thinking about this workshop, I'll have them write about something that happened to them recently or something they did recently. And I had to stop myself right there, because I feel like the question just came into my mind, well, what have I done lately that is new and exciting? And I feel like a lot of us are probably running low on new experiences that we've been having. There's a lot of limitations. So that is really the question I've been asking is, what is driving your writing? Because for me, the thing that usually does, I'm not super able to do in the capacity that I was before. There are limitations placed on where I can go and how I can interact in my own level of comfort with those things. So does anyone want to share what's driving their writing right now?
I can share. So I'm currently working on a novel. It's kind of speculative fiction, but it was born kind of out of my frustration with quarantine. So I just kind of like started writing about how much I hated quarantine, and then it kind of grew into this like kind of like a kind of adventure novel, like set in the near future. So it's interesting.
I love that you're using that frustration as fuel.
Yeah.
Okay. Where else are you finding your drive? Do a couple of people want to share?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can share. My name's Glenda, and right now I'm working on a book-length memoir project that I've been working on for a while about some hitchhiking traveling that I was doing on sailboats around the world. And actually right now in quarantine, it feels like a really great time to be working on it, because usually I feel this weird pull between wanting to just go, I am a sailor. So it's like, why am I sitting at a desk like writing about sailing instead of just doing the thing I really enjoy? And now that is an activity that's possible in quarantine, but I haven't done it for various reasons. And so, yeah, I think kind of similar to what Emily was just talking about, it feels like this real outlet and this way to like travel in my mind when I'm mostly just sitting in my apartment.
Yes, using it as fuel however you can. But I'll say the flip side is true for me too. Like I have found those fueling moments, and I've also found the moments where it's like, I'm not inspired. I don't have anything to draw from right now. I'm feeling low. So I realized as I was kind of taking a look at some of the writing that I've been doing lately, that I've been finding fuel in writing about things that I didn't do, or things that I haven't had the opportunity to do. And it actually, this sort of theme started before the pandemic. I wrote this essay about not being cast on a Swedish reality show that I really wanted to be cast on. I thought it was going to fix my life, you know, if I could just escape and go to Sweden and like, you know, meet my family. That was the prize. It was a very wholesome show. But I did not get cast in the show. And so the whole essay is about this thing that didn't happen. And so what do you fill that space with? And I find myself like leaning more and more into those questions lately during this time, right, of social distancing. And so, for example, here is the first line from an essay in progress called Pandemic Diary. During these unprecedented times, I didn't keep a diary like I was supposed to. Instead, I moved into a new apartment, a loft with architectural details, including a decommissioned elevator shaft in the southeast corner of my bedroom. The new apartment is exactly 3 blocks from my old one. At least the pandemic happened in rural Virginia before the heat set in. We moved the 3 blocks, masked and efficiently, with very little help. So kind of looking at this theme of like what didn't happen and starting with that as a hinge for a piece of writing, I felt like at least perhaps we can all write about things that we haven't been able to do. That negation, the things it could even be your characters, right? Or your speakers don't do, or they avoid, or they don't have time for, or decide against, or they forget, or sidestep. You know, there's all sorts of reasons, not just, you know, the constraints of COVID-19 that keep us or our characters from doing things. And so I feel like writing into those spaces of what isn't possible, or the limitations that we either place on ourselves or the world is placing on our characters, can be really useful for characterization. Thinking about how that person speaks or how they think and what they do with those limitations. So this isn't necessarily a new concept. I feel like it's something we do all the time in our writing, and I definitely was doing a lot without realizing it. But I do think it's something that we surely can practice right now intentionally as a way to generate new material during a pandemic when perhaps experiences are few. So You don't really need to have anything that you're currently working on. This is purely a series of prompts meant to generate new writing and a new way in, perhaps, to your material. So you could have something in mind, or you could have nothing in mind and just sort of see where this takes you. It's really meant to be that generative. And I did that because the most useful generative prompts that I've ever participated with have really wide parameters. They have a starting point. The stakes are low, but the parameters are pretty wide. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for here. But before we get started, I think just like anything else, it's useful to warm up. So before we get to the prompts, I'm going to introduce a warm-up activity. And this is this is an exercise I've taken from Natalie Goldberg's book, Wild Mind. She has a series of rules for her warm-up activities. They're meant to be brain clearing activities. I'll share this document with you shortly. But here are the rules for our warm-up activity. Keep your hand moving, so don't stop. Lose control. Just go where your mind takes you and don't try to have a destination in mind. Be specific as possible with your word choice, but also don't think. That's not as contradictory as it might seem. Don't worry about punctuation, spelling, and grammar. Number 6 is my favorite. You are free to write the worst junk in America. I tell that to myself all the time, and go for the jugular. So don't be afraid to go there. So I'm going to set the timer for this warm-up activity. It's not part of the prompt, but you will need either a window open in which to type or a notebook handy. And I'm going to set the timer for just 5 minutes. I encourage you to walk away from the computer or turn it around during this time if you are writing in a notebook, just to sort of give yourself a break from the Zoom action. But the prompt is, I remember. That's all it is. The 2 words, I remember, and just see where that takes you. So I'll give you 5 minutes to just do some warm-up writing and clear the brain. I remember. Okay, that's 5 minutes. You can finish up that thought or stop, whatever. So again, these are meant to be brain clearing exercises in Wild Mind, which I've added a link to on this document that I'll share with you later. Goldberg talks about clearing the mind, getting all the junk out, and sort of getting into your writerly stance before setting back into a project that you're working on, being useful and important sometimes. And usually she goes for 10 minutes, but for the sake of time, I'm shortening that activity. And if you're willing, I have one more, hopefully illuminating warm-up activity that I'll time for another 5 minutes. And the same rules will apply. Only this time, you're going to start with the words, I don't remember. I'm sneaking in the negation already. I don't remember. So let's start for another 5 minutes. I don't remember. Where does that take you? You can finish up that thought. That's 5 minutes. Hopefully we all feel nice and warmed up. I'll let you stretch your wrists now, and we'll take a short break from the writing before we go back to the actual prompt. But I am just curious if there's anybody out there who's willing to share their experience. Did you notice any difference in the themes that emerged between these two exercises? I remember, and then the flip side, I don't remember. Yeah, or not. Either way, I'd love to hear how that went for you.
When I wrote about how I remembered, it was much more hopeful than when I wrote about the things I don't remember, because I think I wrote about things that maybe I just wanted to forget when I wrote that.
Yeah, so definitely a difference there in tone, right? And things that you wanted to forget. Interesting. Anyone have a similar or very different experience?
I had a different experience. The I don't remember, like, kind of telescoped me in time to sort of compare and contrast from something from I wrote about one experience, and then it was like, oh, this experience is so different than this other past experience. I don't remember those feelings. I don't remember, like, this is a new, yeah, it allowed for a compare and contrast in an interesting way.
Oh, lovely. Yeah, yeah. I think I often cheat at this exercise. Whenever I don't remember, it always ends up being something that I do remember. And it's really interesting to hear about the experiences that you have doing it. Feel free to add in the chat too if you'd like to share an experience that you had with these prompts. We could probably take one more too if there's anyone out there that wants to talk about that experience of writing the two warm-up activities.
In the don't remember, I realize that a lot of times when I am like writing from memory, unless it's something recent, if I'm writing about the past, I'm thinking about like a photograph or a story someone told me. And that seemed interesting. I mean, that there was actually, I could find where the place was.
Ah, lovely. And then when you don't remember, what is there also like did it have to do with photographs, or kind of where did you go with that?
Well, that's where I kind of noticed that that's how I tend to write. And I actually had a chance to study with Natalie when she was just getting going. And
Awesome.
And I'd forgotten about this, and it just felt so freeing, because I think I have like a topic or a photo or an image in mind that I want to write about. And the first part, what I do remember, I was able to just keep going. The second part, I probably wrote, I don't remember 16 times, because nothing, was triggered. But I was trying to keep the pen moving and keep the exercise going.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think the things that we don't remember can often be a lot more spare. But if we take the time to think about them, they can add a richness to the description or to our characters, way of viewing the world, or something about ourselves that we suddenly realize as we're writing. So with that idea of negation in mind, I went searching for some masters of this, and I realized there's a whole lot of ways that writers can manipulate and use this technique. And the more we become aware of the technique, like I said, you're probably already doing it to some degree. The more control you have about being able to achieve a certain effect with that, right? So the first example that I thought of immediately was Joanne Beard's 1996 essay, The Fourth State of Matter. Has anyone read this before? It's pretty familiar if you're a nonfiction writer, especially. It's sort of a masterclass in writing a very, very complicated essay about a political, traumatic, and troubling subject. So I think of this, it was just the first thing that came to mind, because the whole plot, of course, hinges on something that she didn't do, an experience that she did not have. So lots of things are happening in Joanne Beard's life. I'll summarize it for those of you that have not read it recently or ever. She's caring for an elderly dog. That's a huge component of this piece. Squirrels have infested her home. That's also a component of this piece. She's in the middle of a confusing divorce. There's some balance between the things happening in her life. And she works as an editor for a science journal in Iowa City. So she writes a lot about her job, but she's also preoccupied with these things going on in her personal life. And she's really worried about her dog, who recently fell down the basement stairs while she was at work and was suffering. And she didn't know how long that he had been there. And she's so anxiety ridden at work that she just cannot stay. She has to go home. So she does not stay at work. And that's sort of the hinge that this essay focuses on. She goes home after lunch. She doesn't stay. She can't do her job. And it happens to be the same afternoon that a disgruntled graduate student brings a gun to the office and goes on a shooting spree and kills all of her colleagues. And so, of course, there are lots of things that Beard's narrator does in the essay. She chases those squirrels out of her house. She takes loving care of her dog. She watches the news when the story about her colleagues breaks, and she receives a lot of comfort from friends. But the entire plot hinges on what she doesn't do and what instead is allowed to happen in that space. So again, that is the first kind of example that comes to mind. And then I recently read a book of essays by the poet Molly McCulley Brown called Places I've Taken My Body. And I thought that this particular essay called Public Anatomy was another beautiful but different example of something her first person narrator, which is a version of Brown herself, doesn't get to do. To kind of set this up for you, Brown is abroad in Bologna, Italy, and she cannot enter many buildings because they're inaccessible for people with wheelchairs. So instead of, a choice like Joanne Beard's narrator makes, here it is a limitation that is placed on her by the setting and the city itself. So I just love to read it to you because it's really beautiful. I keep a mental catalog of all the buildings it looks like I could enter without pain or trouble. Shops selling cheap plastic cell phone cases covered in fish, rhinestones, and flowers. Men's tailor, what must be a pawn shop, with a strange constellation of old boom boxes, jewelry, and sports equipment in the front window. A bridal boutique. Quickly, I learned that my best bet is major chains. McDonald's, the Apple Store, the perpetual neon of the H&M. It's strange to see these corporations transplanted into this ancient city, taking over milky marble rooms with industrial fryers and faux leather leggings. But it's even stranger to reckon with the ways they make me realize capitalism is really the only force that's carved any kind of place for my body in this extraordinary city. Some corporate policy that reads, in summary, we build ramps in all our stores so that no matter what, you can come in and spend your money. Most of the churches in the city don't have obvious ramps unless they're also tourist attractions. But the automatic doors of the boutique Best Western have been retrofitted so they're exactly flush with the street. I understand these corporations' motives. I'm frequently disgusted by their politics. I would resent their intrusion into any landscape I loved. They're the part of the city I want least, charmless places vacated of layered meaning. But when I discover that the Apple Store has a bathroom with elevator access, big enough that I can use it in the wheelchair, I cry a little at the sink before I leave it. I've been limiting the amount of water I allow myself to drink during the day because I'm afraid of ending up desperate to pee with nowhere to go. Just think that is a beautiful reflection that these constraints placed on the writer have allowed her to have. the plot, you know, or that reflection here hinges on the thing that she doesn't do because she is unable to do it. And then the last example I want to share with you is another book I've read recently, Camille Dungy's Guidebook to Relative Strangers, another poet. There's a theme emerging here. And this particular essay is called Tales from a Black Girl on Fire, or Why I Hate to Walk Outside and See Things Burning. And I chose this because it shows another way that the narrator is using this concept of like negation, or the thing that she doesn't do, to tell a story. And here it is a really intentional choice to not accept invitations to bonfires from friends. When I lived in Virginia, I associated open fire with historically informed terror. Many of my Southern white friends enjoyed hosting bonfires, but I started to decline their gracious invitations. Though their gatherings often began with a pleasant hike and a lovely dinner al fresco, I could never relax on these outings. I knew the woods we walked through would reveal their malice because I was conditioned to fear. Eventually, the fire would be lit and my friends' faces transformed. The wood in those piles was innocent and yet acted out a role. Because I was afraid of what humans had done to other humans in those woods and on those tree-provided fires, I'd come to fear the forests and the trees. So this is another narrator that is not doing something, only in this case, very purposefully, to resist being in those situations of fear and terror. That the reflection really lets us in on why, and the awareness that her white friends lack with these invitations. So I think that's all I'll say about the examples. Like I said before, I wanted to provide you a few very different ways that this could be used, and then provide you a prompt. We'll do some writing now where we sort of take this idea and put it to practice. So just like before, the same rules are to keep your pen moving and not think as you generate new material. And the first exercise that we'll go through is here at the bottom of the screen. Can you see that okay? I didn't, fill in the blank. So your job is to write about something you didn't do. And it could be a constraint of COVID, or it could be something completely different that you could not access, like Brown's narrator, or you purposefully declined, like Dungy's narrator, or anxiety forced you to make this decision, like Joanne Beard's narrator. So, and you could also change the I to the name of a character or speaker if you're writing fiction or poetry and you want to use this to sort of find a new way in with one of your subjects. I invite you to do that too. But we'll go for a little bit longer here. Let's go 7 minutes and see how that feels. And you'll do just like you did before. I didn't. And lose control and see where this prompt takes you. I'll let you know when the time's up. that is time. Finish up that thought. And don't look at what you wrote as we continue. The next part of this exercise is to think about what that empty space of the didn't was filled with instead. So I didn't keep a pandemic diary like I was supposed to do. Instead, I moved into a new apartment. So what happened in that space instead? Write the opposite of that. What did the circumstance that you began writing about above allow to happen in its place? Don't think. Keep the pen moving. I'll keep the time for you. Go ahead and begin. That is time. You can finish up that thought, especially if it was taking you in an interesting direction. I promised a 3-part exercise, so we've got just one left. I noticed that all of these examples that I included here used images central to the story to really expand with description and sometimes cross over into the realm of metaphor. In Brown's piece, we see the churches off in the distance, the limitations of having no ramps, but what we really get a description of is what the Apple Store looks like, and the bright neon glow of the H&M and the ramp flush with the street at the boutique Best Western. In Dungy's piece, we see the faces of her friends transformed by fire, and understand why that would be so frightening to experience. So your final prop is to choose a physical detail from either paragraph that you wrote before to expand with some description. And I think it's absolutely okay if this crosses over into the realm of metaphor. That often happens to me, but try to stay with that image the whole time and see what you can uncover with the descriptive and perhaps medical or metaphorical work that happens during our last few minutes. So I'm going to start the timer again for you. Once you choose that image, then your job is to lose control and not think anymore. And that is time. You can finish up that thought. We're in our very last minute of this workshop. That worked out well. I have placed a couple of things in the chat for you. One is the link to the worksheet that I was screen sharing with the prompts on it so that you can have a copy of that digitally. I've also sent that to Candace, so if I might ask, Candace, would you mind emailing that to everyone who
Sure.
participated? Thank
Sure.
you. And I've also just listed a quick bibliography here of books and essays that I mentioned with links if you're curious about reading more of those writers' work. There you go. There is nothing like a bunch of writers in a room writing together, even if it's a virtual room. So thank you for being here with me. Hopefully you got a start on something, or you started thinking about a piece that you're working on or your character's motivations in a new way. You know, like I said, we are always writing about things that we or our characters or speakers don't do. But perhaps this exercise is a new way into your material when we're feeling stuck inside of our homes and we literally cannot do a lot of things. So thanks again for sharing your time and energy with me. It's been a lot of fun.
Great.
We also placed, oh, thank you, Erica, but we also placed a survey in the chat. It's at the very top. So if you could take a few moments and just kind of fill it out and let us know how you enjoyed this program and just like what you got from the workshop. That'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I hope to see you at the craft talk or at the reading tonight. Thanks a lot. Erica, Emily and I are going to walk over to the radio station and we'll call you from there with, we're going to try to do it with the Skype, the radio Skype account. So we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see you soon.
About 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, bye-bye.
I don't see that survey, Emily. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry, it's all the way at the top of the chat. It's the very first link.
At the very top, I see Mira Frank to everyone.
Oh, okay. It's in my chat. Maybe because I don't know.
Well, I'll catch another one later.
Okay, here, come here. I'm posting it now. I don't know why it didn't show up to everyone.
There it is. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, I'm gonna end this meeting.
Yep. Sure.